Hey, so today we are talking all about masking fluid, and more generally, we're going to talk about how you keep white in your watercolor paintings. That's where we need to start. So the main way that you keep white in watercolor is by not painting on the paper and just leaving the white of the paper. So let me show you a couple of examples of that. Okay, so these are my penguins that I painted, and you can see that there are some areas of the penguins that are pure white. Just didn't paint there. That's it. It's as simple as that. When you have large sections like this, it's really pretty easy to keep everything separate. So just not painting there will keep it white. Same thing on the donkey here on his nose. You can see that this whole section is basically bright white. And then the next way that you can kind of add white in is by using a white jelly roll pen. So you can see his whiskers here on the sides. These are made with a jelly roll pen. Jelly roll pens look like this, and you buy them, you can get them even at like Walmart, and they're usually just a couple dollars for a pack of 4. I don't know exactly how many. And they're kind of hit or miss, if I'm being honest. They will work for a time and then they will stop working. And sometimes in your pack of 4, you get 3 that work pretty well for a while and 1 that never works. But they're cheap. So that is how I did the whiskers on the donkey. You can also use white gouache. Gouache is a paint that's kind of more transparent than acrylic, but more opaque than watercolor. It's somewhere in between. And so you can use this on top of watercolor to achieve white, but I would not recommend using it on a big area like this. So it's gonna be better for doing like little highlights in the eyes, or maybe some of these little hairs. If you didn't want to use a pen, you could use white gouache. Another product that's similar to white gouache is this Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof White. So this is pretty opaque. You just put a little bit of this on your brush, you use it just like any other paint, and it's pretty much gonna cover anything that's there with white. You could also use a white paint pen. So this is a Posca marker, and they come with different size nibs so that you can do different widths of lines. I tend to go for the jelly roll pen more than this because it looks a little bit more natural to me than a big thick paint line, but there may be times when you want to use this. Here's another example of me using the white paint pen. You can see all the little fine hairs on Orville Piggenbacher's face and on his nose. Those were all done with a white jelly roll pen. Here are a couple of like more unconventional ways to mask off the white of the paper, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend this for something that you want to be like a really finished piece that you're gonna sell. But if you're just playing around in your sketchbook, you're painting with your kids, you're just making something for fun, absolutely. You can just use white crayon. You've probably done this like on an Easter egg where the wax kind of masks off that area from the dye. It's the same thing with watercolor. So you can just draw on with a white crayon and it'll leave the white of the paper underneath. I did the same technique recently in a video on the whale shark where I just used the white crayon to make the dots, and it works great. Another thing you could use is rubber cement. So I did that on this painting. So you can see these white lines and the sort of white circly smudges. Those were all done with rubber cement. Rubber cement and masking fluid are very similar. It's the same principle. So you're gonna put it on, let it dry, paint on top, and then peel it off. So that's what I did here, and that's how I achieved the white on this painting. The only negative to using rubber cement is that it's kind of hard to control. It's very like stringy and sticky, and it's not as easy to manipulate as masking fluid. Masking fluid comes in a couple different forms. The one that I use the most often is this fine line masking fluid. So it comes in this bottle with the little needle point so that you can get a very, very fine line on your masking fluid. This one came with 2 different tips. This one has a little bit bigger gauge than this one. I will tell you that they get clogged really, really easily, and sometimes you will use them a couple times and then you feel like you cannot get it unclogged and you have to really work at it. There's a little needle in the cap that goes into, I probably will not even be able to do this because my eyes are actually terrible, but it goes right in. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to do it from this distance. Now you know that about me. I have a really hard time seeing stuff. My depth perception is terrible, actually. Like, I can't thread a needle. Yeah, anyway, you learned something new. So this goes in this, and it might be easier for you. Oh, I got it. So there you go. It goes down in there, and that will keep the tip from getting clogged. I do recommend that when you're finished using this, before you do this step, go ahead and rinse out the lid so that there's no masking fluid in there when you put the little needle down in there, and then make sure that you store it standing up so that it doesn't lay flat like this and flow back into the tip. Because once it's stuck in there, it is tough. Daniel Smith is another brand, and it comes like this. This one, actually, I just bought. I have never used this brand because my friend Lacey of Rebel Unicorn Crafts, who we all know and love, she did a test and she did not like this at all. But I thought we'd test it. But it is nice because it comes with extra tips. So if this one gets clogged, you can just change it out, and they give you like 4 extra ones. So that's nice, but it's not nice if it rips our paper. We're gonna see, because we're gonna test it. So that's a different kind. You can also buy masking fluid like this, where it's just like a container and you have to pour it out into something else, and then you have to use a tool to apply the masking fluid. So I am going to show you a couple of different tools for applying masking fluid, and we're going to do some tests. One tool is one of these rubber tipped brushes or rubber tipped tool. They come in different sizes and shapes, and these are sometimes used with clay. You may be able to find them in the clay tools section. I'm pretty sure that's where I got these. But the nice thing about a rubber tip is that when it gets masking fluid on it and the masking fluid dries, you can just pull it off. You can use a brush, but you're basically gonna ruin your brush with the masking fluid because it's gonna get stuck in the bristles and you're never gonna get it out. I did see a video where they said you can dip the brush into dish soap and then in the masking fluid, and that will enable you to clean the brush without anything happening to it. I have not tried that. You could try it. I don't really ever use a brush because I find that the rubber tip tools work really well, or you can use a ruling pen. So a ruling pen is a drafting tool. There is rubber cement stuck in there right now. It's a drafting tool. So this little thing, you turn that and it gets wider, or you turn it the other way and it gets more narrow, and it will pick up the masking fluid and allow you to make very fine little lines with it. So the ruling pen was really a game changer for me. I really like the ruling pen. So I'm going to show you how to use this too. If you're going to work with masking fluid, one thing that I would highly recommend is a rubber eraser. So this was a pack of 6 that I got on Amazon. It was $6. I did see this morning that you can actually buy the ruling pen and 2 erasers for like $8. So if you don't have one, you're thinking about getting one, you can get both at the same time. The rubber eraser is going to make it way easier to clean all of the masking fluid off of your painting without like rubbing blisters on your fingers trying to rub it off. So what kinds of things can you do with masking fluid? You're going to use it to keep the white of the paper, but like What does that mean? So this is the one that I did most recently. I shared this on my socials the other day. So this was masking fluid that I used to make all of the dots. So I basically put it down first, then painted over the top of it. And you can see that the white of the paper was left intact. So that's the general principle of masking fluid. This is another example where I used it on the tentacles of the octopus. And then I actually went over some of the tentacles and added some gray so it wasn't quite so bright white. So that's another technique. You can mask it off and leave the white and then paint on top of the white to get a lighter value, if that makes sense. I went through a phase of being really into masking fluid, and I was doing masking fluid in my sketchbook like every day. So I did these flowers with it where I just masked out the edges of the petals and the leaves and then painted over the top of it. Jellyfish, which is what we're gonna do today. Space. There's a spider. So I did the spider web in masking fluid and also the web coming down. And I did some masking fluid on his legs and around his body. So I could paint the background and then come back with just a little bit of color on there. This was a little koi pond, some dragonflies, and like, whoops. What are those called? Cattails. Cattails. Another octopus with some like kelp. I did this one after I watched my octopus teacher. I don't know if you've seen that, but if it doesn't make you love octopuses, I don't know what will. Anyway, so I masked off part of the kelp and part of the octopus and then painted. So yeah, I mean, you can have a lot of fun with masking fluid. I really love it, and I think you'll enjoy it once you start playing around with it. I almost forgot these. I did these last week and I posted them, but yeah, so I did the coral outline and the outline of the fish and some little squiggly lines on the fish. And then I also did the whale. So for the whale, I outlined the whole whale in white and I did some of the dots and the lines in white. But then I felt like they were a little too bright. So I actually ended up going over the lines a little bit with some of the paint to just kind of tone it down a little bit. So that's what I'm talking about, where you can layer paint over your maintained white space at the end to get a sort of different effect. This is another example of that. So on my big dinosaur, I used masking fluid on his teeth. And I painted in the black all around the teeth. And then once I took the masking fluid off, I was able to come back and add the sort of yellow and gray, because I don't think a T-Rex's teeth are gonna be bright white, probably not. So that's just another example of how you can use it to make your job of going around it easier and then go back and add more paint after. Okay, so we are gonna test out some of these different types of masking fluid and use some of the tools. And since you may not have all of these, you may wanna just watch this section. It's not gonna be long. I'm just gonna show you how to do it, and then we will get to the painting. I've got my different masking fluids here. So this is the fine line one. So this is the one that I use most often. And the reason that I like it is because it has this really fine point and it enables you to make a really fine line. That part's not so fine. Got a little gloppy there at the beginning, but you can make a pretty precise mark with it. And little dots. So that's the fine line one. So you can see it's pretty easy to use. Let's see if we can. This one is Exhibit A. All right, so the second one is the Daniel Smith one. This is the one that Lacey was not a fan of and I have not tried before. I did have to cut the little tip off because it doesn't come that way, but that's a way bigger blob in the beginning there. You can still, I'm getting a lot of bubbles. You can still make a fairly small line with it. I mean, I would say it's a little harder to control it, but not like significantly from the other one. You can still get a pretty small little dot on there. We're gonna see, let's do the bubbles. I don't know what's going on with the bubbles. This is sample B. All right, there's that one. Then there's the Winsor and Newton masking fluid, and this one you have to put into a little container, so I just have a little extra circle thing here. Oh, we're gonna leave that. It's fine. Okay, so we're gonna use the ruling pen on this one. The ruling pen is the drafting tool that I showed you, where you can adjust the width with the little knob on the side. And the skinnier you make it, or the closer together you make it, the finer the line is gonna be. If you make it too wide, it really won't hold the masking fluid, and it doesn't work as well. But you can see that it holds quite a bit of masking fluid in there and will allow you to control it pretty easily. And you can make some sort of fine dots with it. This really is my go-to when I'm not using the fine line, because I think it makes it the easiest for controlling the masking fluid. So then if we make it wider, we'll see if we can get it to hold the, ooh, there's a glob in there. Yeah, I think I've got it too wide now. It won't hold it in between there. But you kind of get the idea. It's, you know, it's not an exact science. You kind of have to go back and go over it a couple times. But this is a good tool. It does work pretty well for me most of the time. I'm gonna make it a little bit more narrow to write our letter C here. And you do have to keep sort of dipping back into your masking fluid to get more. So the other tool that I showed you was the little rubber tipped tool, and this you use basically the same way as the ruling pen, where you just dip it in and you draw with it like you would a pencil or a pen or whatever. But you do have to dip back into it quite a bit because it doesn't hold the masking fluid on there very well. So this is a good tool if you don't have a ruling pen, but it's like I said, the ruling pens are not super expensive. So if you think you're gonna get into masking fluid, I would just get one. Buy the one that has the rubber eraser with it. Or if you're into buying art supplies, you just buy all of them, because that's what we do sometimes too, right? Okay. Let's let these dry, and then we'll paint over them and then peel them off to see what kind of results we get. Our little experiment is all dry. So you can see this was the fine line one, and it dried kind of greenish. And then the Daniel Smith dried sort of orangish or brownish. And the Winsor and Newton is kind of yellow, but that doesn't really matter because it's gonna get peeled off in the end anyway. So they are all dry now, and we can just paint over the top of them, and it's gonna leave the white underneath. So I'm just gonna quickly go over these, and then we'll let it dry, and then we'll peel it off and see what we think. So this is all dry at this point, and now it's really up to you how you want to remove it. You can just use your fingers to kind of pull it off. Some of them are going to come off easier than others. This is the Daniel Smith one. And you see the white underneath. I would say that came off fairly easily. This is the fine line one. This is the one that I usually use. Again, that one came off fairly easily. So you see you do get these little bits after you take it off. And let's use the rubber eraser so you can see it will just pull it right off. So Lacey had problems with the Daniel Smith tearing the paper, and we didn't have any of those problems with this one. So it may depend on the type of paper that you're using, or it may depend on how long it sits on the paper. Sometimes if it sits for longer, it can be harder to get it to come off. So I would say further testing is probably needed on that one, but it seemed okay to me. Like for me right now, I think the biggest difference between the three is in how you apply them, because in terms of the way they mask off the paper and the ease of removal, they're all very similar to me. So take that for what it's worth. We're ready to use some masking fluid. I've got a piece of Canson watercolor paper in 9x12, and I did tape it down so that I'll have a nice border when we add that watery background to it. But you can use any size and any kind of watercolor paper. And I'm going to be using my student set of watercolor paints, but any watercolor paints will work for this. The first thing you're going to need though is some masking fluid. So I am going to use the fine line masking fluid because I feel like it's the easiest to control and kind of show you how to draw your jellyfish using masking fluid with an applicator, because I think this is the easiest way to learn. And then you can kind of graduate to using the ruling pen or the rubber tip tool, but this is a great place to start. So this is what we're going to use. I am not going to start with a drawing on this. You can if you want to, but really jellyfish are just very like blobby organic shapes. And for me, I don't want the pencil lines to show through on the white paper underneath the masking fluid. Now, that said, you could erase them. If you have, if you put pencil lines down and you put masking fluid on the top, when you remove the masking fluid, you will be able to erase those lines. Any lines that are underneath watercolor, you cannot erase. So that's just something to keep in mind. But for our purposes today, these are just very simple jellyfish. I don't think that you need to draw it out first. That is up to you though, if you don't feel comfortable. Or maybe you want to practice on another sheet of paper first, and that would be fine too. But we're just gonna start with a sort of just blobby, half circle-y shape. It's maybe mushroom shaped. Maybe I'm just obsessed with mushrooms right now. I don't know. And then we're gonna put a little circle in the middle, because this one's gonna be like we're looking down on it. And we'll do some lines that sort of come like this. So this is the top of the jellyfish. And I'm just putting light pressure on the masking fluid to get it to flow. And you can kind of use the tip like without putting pressure on it to sort of move the masking fluid around if you want to. And then we'll do, I'm gonna map out where the jellyfish themselves are, and then we'll put the tentacles in. So I'm thinking 3 jellyfish because that was the example that I showed you. So let's do another one that's gonna be kind of in the middle. And this one is, again, just sort of the, it is sort of a mushroom shape. I don't know. It's almost like a half circle with just a little bit on the bottom. Because then we can come up here and we can make, so this is sort of the, this is the opening where the tentacles are gonna come out. If that makes sense to you. And let's do some lines coming up here from this one. You can almost make them like U shapes. But you really can just draw with the masking fluid pen, or if you're using the ruling pen or the rubber tipped tool, you can just use, you'll just have to keep dipping back into it. I'm gonna put some little dots on here too. But this is, I mean, this is really pretty simple. Like, jellyfish are one of the easiest shapes to make for me, because they really are just blobs. Let's do another one right here. And this one is really blobby. I'm adding a little bit more and kind of smoothing it out a little bit. So for this one, I don't think we're gonna do, I think this one's gonna be more of like just a straight side view, not like you're looking up into the jellyfish. So we can just put, let's put a little circle sort of right here, like that's the top of it. And then we'll do some lines coming down like this. Not trying to be like super precise. Put another little half circle in there. And now we can put in the tentacles. So the tentacles are gonna be kind of like thick up here. There's gonna be a center part where there's some thicker strands, and then they come down and they get a little bit thinner. And they cross over, and they just kind of trail off at the ends. And there's usually some that kind of come off the edge here that's maybe a little bit thinner. That guy did not connect to anything, so I'm gonna come back up. And you can make thicker sections in here if you want to. You could put as many tentacles in as you like. And this guy is gonna be coming this way. Make sure I get some of those thick ones in there. And you just wanna like have fun with it. Create a lot of movement in there, because that's what's gonna make it look interesting. I'm thickening these up just a little bit more. Maybe some of these tentacles come back around this way. Who knows? Okay, now this one, I want to fill up some of this space. So this one, I'm gonna have his tentacles sort of go up there. So we're putting in those thicker ones. And then we're gonna have, maybe they come down here to the top of this one. Maybe there's some thicker ones in here too. I think I need to add a little bit more in here. So, yours are not gonna look exactly like mine. I probably should have said that at the beginning, but yeah, they're not gonna look just like mine. Yours are gonna look like yours. And that's what makes art. It's that you can't really recreate somebody else's art. We're gonna stop there. And as far as the jellyfish go, and let's just put in, I'm just gonna put in some dots that are gonna be like, kind of like bubbles. Maybe we'll do let's do some circles, some little circles that are like more abstract. You can see it's already starting to dry. Maybe some of these come down this way too. This guy's he's got a lot. He's got a lot going on. Yeah, it's easy to just keep going with this. So add as many or as few tentacles as you like, and then we have to just let it dry. Okay, our masking fluid is dry. You can tell it kind of changes colors. It might still be a little bit wet in some of these bigger areas, like underneath, on the inside. It might be a little bit wet, but that's okay. It's dry to the touch. We're just gonna keep our painting really simple. I'm gonna do just wet on wet. So I'm gonna add some water here into the top of this jellyfish. And then I'm gonna pick a color, and my jellyfish are not gonna all be the same color. And is it like that in nature? Probably not. No, probably not. But I'm not too worried about that. I'm painting it the way I want to paint it, and I want mine to be colorful. You might not want yours to be colorful, and if that is the case, that is okay. You can make your jellyfish whatever colors you want. I'm just dropping in some color here. This one's going to be pretty much blue color, and I'm not making them just like a solid color. I'm gonna leave some of this lightness in there, sort of like the light is catching on the top, but I am gonna put a sort of dark center there. I grabbed the wrong color. I mean, wrong color, I don't know, a different color. How about that? I had to grab the different color than I was using, but that's okay. And then as far as the tentacles go, you can kind of decide how you want to do it. Like, I kind of like following some of my lines with the paint. These are going to be white, remember? So if you kind of follow the lines, you'll end up with a sort of outside kind of glowiness to it. We're going to make our water dark. So these are going to kind of look illuminated. That's kind of what I'm going for, because jellyfish are very glowy. So it doesn't have to be precise. It's just adding a little bit of color and just kind of going with it. And it is a little squeaky. Okay, I'm gonna darken up some of these inside parts just a little bit. The parts closest to the jellyfish. But that's really it. That's all I'm gonna do to him. And I'm gonna do the same thing down here on this one. This one, we're gonna do the same thing. So let's clean off our brush, and then grabbing some clean water, we're gonna fill it in. And this one I'm gonna make green. So I just grabbed some green off the palette, just dotting it in. Maybe you wanna choose some lighter green to go in there too. Maybe we wanna put, let's do a little yellow in this one. I'm gonna put some yellow on that. And maybe I'll darken this up even a little bit more, the underneath part. Just to give it a little bit of depth. But I mean, when I say these guys are simple, I'm talking like they're simple. Simple, simple. So doing the same thing on the tentacles where I'm sort of bringing them down. If you touch this puddle with your brush, you'll pull some of that dark green down in too. That's a stylistic choice. You may want to do it or you may not. Let's put some yellow down here in the tentacles too. You might even want to add some tentacles that aren't masked out with masking fluid. Maybe you want to make some additional ones. You can do whatever you want. Okay, so on this one, I'm gonna do it in pinks and purples. So putting my water down and dropping in the pink. Let's get a little bit of purple down here too. I don't think my paint is quite wet enough. There we go. And I'm gonna put a dark center up there too. And we'll do some purple down here. But see, the masking fluid makes it really simple because you're just like, you don't have to be careful. You can just paint over it and you don't have to worry about it. So if you think about like the T-Rex that I showed you, would have taken me a really long time to paint around all those teeth without the masking fluid, but with it, it went pretty quick. All right, so our jellyfish, that's all we're doing to the jellyfish, that's it. But we are gonna let them dry before we put in the background. Our jellyfish are dry and I wanna create a really dark blue. So my blue is not super dark. The darkest blue that's in this student set is not a particularly dark blue. And in fact, it has a lot of green in it, which is fine for this because we're doing water, but I do want to darken it up. So the complement of blue is orange. So if we add a little bit of orange, you're going to see it gets much darker. But it does have a little bit of a green undertone to it because there was so much green in our blue and some yellow in our orange. So to offset that green, we can add a little bit of red, just a little. That was not quite enough. And now we've got this really, really deep blue-gray. And I think that's gonna work nicely with some of the other blues that we have here. So for the water, you're just gonna start adding it in around your jellyfish. Now, you might be super particular about this. I am not. So I am fine with it kind of mixing with the tentacles, with leaving some white space. I just don't really want to be super fussy about it. So I'm just adding my paint in here, kind of around the tentacles, but again, not being like really careful about it because we have the masking fluid down, so we really don't have to be careful about it. I want to be able to see a little bit of this blue, the blue tentacles that we put in there, but it's gonna all layer and it's gonna look good, and you have to just kind of trust the process, which I feel like I say that a lot, but it really is true. So while this is still wet, I'm gonna add a little bit of this blue-green in here too, because I want my water to be sort of all different colors. I don't want it, I'm not trying to get a wash of color that's flat, you know, that looks like a very static color all the way across. I like, especially when I'm painting water, I like for it to be varied and have a lot of blooms in it. Blooms are when you have a lot of water on the paper and the paint will kind of settle out into that water as it dries, and you get these sort of interesting effects where the edges will be more pigmented. And for me, when I'm painting water especially, I like that effect. I like the unevenness of it, the movement in it. I think it all works. So I'm usually fine with it. But that might not be your particular cup of tea. And if it's not, you don't have to do it that way. You can try to make yours exactly the way you want it to be. So I'm gonna mix up a little bit more of this dark blue. A little bit more of that in there, maybe a little bit more of the red in there. There we go. And when we go over the pink with this color, you'll see it turns a little bit purple, and that's fine with me because we've got a lot of purple in this jellyfish, so I don't mind that. So again, you can see how quickly I'm going. I'm not trying to make it perfect. Add some more of this bluish, greenish color in. More of my dark blue. And with masking fluid, you know, you might not be real sure about it. You're painting at first, you might be thinking like, I'm not sure if this is going exactly as intended. But when you take the masking fluid off, you're gonna be like, whoa, okay, it did do what I thought I wanted it to do. It's kind of like a little magical surprise at the end of your painting. At least for me, I always feel like that. I always feel like it's a little bit of a reward at the end to be able to see it all revealed in a magical way. So while this is all wet, you can add as many colors into this water as you want. You can make it as dark as you want, as pigmented as you want. For me, I don't really have a set plan. I'm just kind of adding color here and there and letting it all mix and swirl. I'm gonna do one last round of that dark blue. Oh, that's very dark. I'm gonna put a little bit of water in here. There we go. I'm gonna go ahead and just speed this up because all I did was go back and add a little bit more paint to some of the areas just to darken it up. Now, while it's still wet, if you want to, you can take a little bit of white off your paint palette if you have it, or if you have white gouache or that bleed-proof white, just tap a little bit from your brush onto that wet paint, and it'll add some little ideas of like bubbles in there. It's not going to be bright white like the masking fluid, but it will create some interesting effects for you. Now we have to let this dry totally before we can take the masking fluid off. Our paint's all dry and we're ready to take the masking fluid off. I will say you want to make sure every little bit is dry because it is very sad when you think it's dry and you start rubbing it and you start rubbing paint all over places that you don't want paint. But I think this is dry and I'm going to use my rubber eraser to just start peeling it off. And you'll see it just kind of accumulates and you can just pull it off. You can try to pull it. Sometimes pulling it makes it more likely that you rip your paper, so just be careful. I know it's satisfying, but I think the rubber eraser is like the easiest way to do it without tearing your paper. Look at how white that is. So we're gonna take all of this off and then we'll kind of assess if we think we wanna go back with some more paint because it is very bright in there. So I'm thinking we will probably go back over the top of it with just a light wash in some areas, just so that it will blend just a little bit. So I did get a little bit of a tear in the paper right here. And that does happen sometimes. I don't really have an explanation for it. It's a slight tear, and it is not going to be a big deal, but yeah, it does happen sometimes. Okay, now that the masking fluid is totally off and we've got like a clear picture of what we're dealing with, I do want to go back with a little bit of paint and just fix a couple of these little areas here where the paper tore just a little bit. So basically, I'm just picking a color that's close to it and going in and kind of filling in that space. And then on the tentacles, where it's very, very white, if you want, you can just put a light wash of whatever color your tentacles are over the top of it to sort of break it up a little bit if you have some areas that are maybe a little bit too big. Like up here, I feel like we can maybe just like narrow that space in just a little bit so it's not quite as big. And by doing a light wash over the white, it's still going to be a much lighter value than the other areas of your painting. So it's going to look bright even though you're painting over some of that white space. And I'm going to do just a little bit down here in the pink. Just to narrow in that white space just a little bit. And then let's just put a little bit up here. A little bit up here too. Okay, the only other thing that you might want to do is if you want a few more little tentacles that are just very light, you can use your white jelly roll pen to just add a few more in there, in between the ones that are already there. And that is totally up to you. I think it's finished. I hope when you watch this, you're like, oh, that's really... Something just fell down. I hope that when you watch this, you're like, oh, okay, that's easy. Because it is. It's really easy. And using masking fluid can make your painting look like you did something really special when really it's very simple. I hope you will give masking fluid a try.